The Lady in the Lake is the most enigmatic character on the show, The Haunting of Bly Manor. She's the catalyst and serves as the main antagonist of the whole story. While rarely seen on screen, her ominous presence is felt throughout the show. Glimpses of her can usually be seen by the Wingrave children, who are terrified of her. This is significant because the children interact and see other ghosts at Bly, but they're not particularly scared of the other ghosts, only the Lady in the Lake. The children know that unlike the other spirits that haunt the manor, the Lady in the Lake is the most dangerous. On certain nights, the Lady in the Lake would awake from her deep slumber and emerge from the cold waters of the lake. She would then walk slowly and mechanically through the grounds of Bly, making her way from the lake, past the chapel, and into the manor. Once inside, she would ascend the stairs and make her way to the master bedroom, where she would linger and stare at the bed, searching for someone who is never there. After some time, she would then return to the lake, leaving dirty, muddy footprints throughout the house. The staff at Bly assumes that the footprints are done by the Wingrave children. With Flora's strange sleepwalking and Miles' strange behaviors, it isn't too far-fetched. Only the children know the truth about the muddy footprints, and even if they told the truth, no one would believe them. But who is the Lady in the Lake, and what is she searching for? In this video, I will try to break down this mysterious character's motivation and her fascinating but terrifying history. As I mentioned before, the Lady in the Lake is rarely seen throughout the show. The first sighting of her isn't until episode 4, The Way It Came. The Wingrave children, realizing that the Lady in the Lake is awake and wandering the grounds of Bly, rushes to make sure that their new American au pair, Dani Clayton, does not get in the lady's path. Flora lies to Dani, saying that she has a horrible nightmare regarding her late mother, Charlotte Wingrave. Flora asks the inebriated Dani to get her some milk from the kitchen. In the background, an out-of-focus figure can be seen slowly walking through the manor. The figure is dressed in an old white dressing gown, with long, wet black hair. The children are fearful of this figure, but maintain their composure as they divert Dani's attention to the kitchen. This deception by the children essentially saves the au pair's life. While this is the first sighting, this is not the first allusion to the Lady in the Lake. A talisman with her likeness can be seen amongst Flora's collection. Yet Flora never plays with this talisman. In fact, Flora is quite apprehensive towards it. When Dani finds the talisman in episode 1, The Great Good Place, Flora firmly tells Dani to put the talisman back under her dresser, saying, quote, "She stays there." She says this with unusual sternness and seriousness. Later, she makes Dani promise her not to wander the manor at night, something Dani does not take to heart. Of course, Flora is fearful for Dani's safety, knowing that the Lady in the Lake will sometimes wander the manor at night. The next night, when Dani accidentally steps on the talisman of the lady, now placed in the middle of the room instead of under the dresser, Flora knows that this is a sign that the Lady in the Lake is on her way to the house. Knowing that Dani will not stay in her room as instructed, Flora and Miles decide to lure Dani into Flora's closet and proceeds to lock her inside until the lady has returned to her slumber at the bottom of the lake. The talismans act as a warning for Flora, and it is revealed that another ghost is the one giving Flora early warnings by moving the talismans around. Each talisman represents a person, and the dollhouse represents the manor, making the dresser approximately the lake. So whenever the lady's talisman is not under the dresser, it means that she is awake and wandering. This does not seem to happen every night, and it seems to be quite unpredictable. Flora and Miles only knows that she wanders the night, but they cannot determine the specific night or specific time. The only evidence left of the lady's nightly walk is her wet, muddy footprints, but clues of her true identity are seen all around the grounds of Bly. The first major clue is of course the giant paintings in the grand foyer. 2 paintings of 2 women hang from the second floor. They are dressed in 17th century dresses, dating the painting to be several centuries old. In episode 4, Flora is found by Dani Clayton, playing outside the small chapel. Flora is making grave rubbings, and the surname of Lloyd is seen on multiple tombstones, hinting at the manor's previous owners. Inside the chapel, Flora makes another rubbing on the floor, while Dani and Hannah are having a conversation. Flora walks off with Hannah, leaving Dani alone in the chapel. Dani goes to leave, and the camera lingers on the rubbing that Flora had made on the floor. The name Viola Lloyd is in focus, finally giving the name of the mysterious lady in the lake. Viola's story will not be elaborated on until episode 8, The Romance of a Certain Close. The narrator tells the story of Viola Lloyd, setting her origins towards the middle of the 17th century. Viola is the eldest daughter of the wealthy lord of Bly Manor. His name seems to be lost to time, but the narrator calls him Lord Willoughby, for it sounds fitting for a respectable lord. Lord Willoughby is a widower and has 2 daughters, Viola and Perdita, who were born 5 years apart. Unfortunately, another sister passed, only a few weeks after life. Perdita was named after this lost daughter. With no male heirs, Bly Manor was ripe for the taking. After Lord Willoughby passes, men flock to woo the sisters in hopes of vying for control over Bly Manor. Viola, a cunning and headstrong woman, has no intentions of losing her beloved home to these men. Together with Perdita, the 2 sisters devised a plan with the goal of retaining control over their family home. Viola invites a distant male cousin to Bly, a man named Arthur Lloyd, who is described to be an honest, resolute, and intelligent man. Perdita is left to greet Arthur as Viola bides for time, having Perdita entertaining him in her stead. Perdita finds Arthur to be a gentleman who is studied and well-traveled. He was also handsome, well-read, spoke French, and played the flute. This stirs feelings within Perdita, but before she can act on them, Viola finally makes her grand appearance. She excuses her tardiness, explaining that she needed to collect rent from those who thought they would be able to take advantage of her father's passing. They had underestimated the shrewd and cunning Viola's ability to keep up with her father's bookkeeping and business. While this is true, she is also using this as an opportunity to send Arthur a message. In sharp contrast with her more demure and ladylike sister, Viola rides in fashionably late due to business of collecting rent from her subjects, with sweat on her brow and riding boots still muddy from her travels. She's sending a clear message of dominance over Bly. She was Lady of Bly Manor. Even if Arthur chose to marry her or her sister Perdita, Viola would be in charge. She had even commissioned a large painting of herself. The painting is hung above the grand staircase, and Viola seems to lord over those who enter the manor. After some wooing, Viola and Arthur weds at a small chapel at Bly, and she retains her ladyship over Bly Manor. During their ceremony, vows are exchanged, but significantly, Viola omits the promise to obey her husband. The vicar believed this to be an innocent mistake, but it is of course deliberate on Viola's part, for she would never obey anyone and would never submit, not even to God, something only her sister Perdita understood. With the business of her marriage done and Bly Manor firmly under her control, Viola begins to feel a new restlessness within her, something called the new disquiet by the narrator. She would wake at night and find herself restless, so she would walk in the manor, searching for something to ease her, leading to a new strange routine. She would sleep, then she would wake, and then she would walk, searching for something beyond her reach. In time, Viola grows a genuine fondness for her husband Arthur and comes to truly love him. And with their love comes the birth of their daughter. Immediately, Viola grows a fierce attachment to her daughter and bestows words of wisdom and love onto her, saying, quote, "I have no honeyed words to speak. It is fierce out there, but you are fiercer. Bly belongs to you, and they will try to take it from you, as they did me. But I will not let them. Instead, we shall move mountains, my girl. It is you, it is me, it is us." These words will grow into something so profound that it will alter the course of not just Viola and her daughter, but all those who enter Bly. With the birth of Isabel, Viola settles into a new idyllic life with her family. But happiness is fleeting, and darker days have befallen Bly. Lingering attraction between Arthur and Perdita remains and has never fully got away. A perceptive and vigilant Viola picks up on this and begins to grow suspicious of her dear sister. But as her suspicion grows, so does something else, something more physical and deadly. What begins as a tickle in Viola's lungs grows into a horrible deadly disease. A plague doctor diagnoses Viola with, quote-unquote, the lung, now more commonly known as TB or tuberculosis. This was a very prevalent disease in the 17th century, and treatments back then were ineffective, so the prognosis was usually quite grim for the time period. To her family's dismay, the doctor predicts that Viola only has months to live. To prevent the sickness from spreading, the doctor advises a quarantine of Viola, removing her from her husband, her sister, and her daughter, something that devastates Viola. She's confined in her room and subjected to all sorts of treatments in an attempt to cure her, but to no avail. The vicar is once again called to Bly to perform last rites. The vicar reads, quote, "I go and prepare a place for you." To which a defiant Viola responds, "No, I do not go. Just tell your God that I do not go." Arthur is dismayed at his wife's response and pleads with her to recite her last rites to cleanse her spirit and soul before death, but Viola is unfazed. Perdita rushes to Viola's side in support of her sister, saying, quote, "You tell them, sister. You tell this priest and the God he fawns upon. You tell them no. God should know better. She's as he made her. If she says she will not go, she will not." The resolute Viola refuses to die, and time goes on. As the narrator puts it, time paid her no mind. Days turned to weeks, weeks into months, and months into years. Round and round the sun, the indifferent planet spun, and then 5 times around the sun, and all is different. 5 long years, and Viola is still fighting her sickness. She has grown weak and bitter, but has stayed ever defiant. When Viola stumbles upon her sister and husband demonstrating a dance to Viola's daughter Isabel, Viola's bitterness and anger erupts. She slaps Perdita in the face. Her disheveled and sick state, along with her verbal and physical abuse towards her own beloved sister, causes Isabel to become frightened of her own mother, who she now only remembers as being sick and locked away. Viola later apologized to Perdita, but only half-heartedly, as a formality. She also tells Perdita that she does not need Perdita to dance with her husband, or to take on any other role that does not belong to her. A demure Perdita agrees, but their once close relationship is now frayed and in tatters. Late that night, Viola would walk the manor singing, "O Willow, O Wally." She would make her way to the master bedroom, the room she once shared with her husband and daughter, and watched over them as they slept. She longed to join them and be with them again, but she would always have to return to her quarantine to keep her daughter safe. Viola's and Perdita's relationship continues to deteriorate as Perdita acts as a nurse to Viola, who continues to take out her frustrations on her sister. Viola continues to berate and hit Perdita, accusing her of trying to usurp her role as Lady of the Bly Manor. While Perdita denies this, Viola knows that this is true. Perdita does covet Viola's life, to be the Lady of Bly Manor, wife to Arthur, and mother to Isabel. When Viola requests to sleep in the same room as her husband and daughter, Perdita denies her, telling her no, she must think of Isabel's health. She also points out to Viola that she's not getting any better, she's getting worse with time. Viola is enraged and attempts to slap Perdita, but this time, Perdita stops her by grabbing her arm. Perdita has grown more bold against Viola and is no longer the demure and submissive woman she once was. Before the 6th year of her sickness, Viola commands that all her jewels and priceless dresses be brought to her room. She places them all in a giant chest, and she sprinkles rose petals over her treasures. She tells Arthur, quote, "I will not be buried in my rings or my dresses. My rings and my lace and my silk, I can say without vanity now that I am done with them. They will be a great inheritance for our daughter, and so you will keep them. You will watch them for her, till she grows into them. They're shrouded, covered in rose petals, keeping their colors in the sweet scented darkness. Do you promise me, Arthur? Promise me that you will keep them for her, that you will keep the key, and you will never give it to anyone except our child. Promise me." Arthur promises her and kisses her hand, and they embrace. It is clear that Arthur loves his wife very much. But the family's fortune begins to diminish, and Arthur begins to take longer and longer trips in hopes of finding better prospects, leaving Viola, Perdita, and Isabel for longer and longer periods of time at Bly. With Arthur gone, Perdita decided that she's had enough. One night, during one of Viola's coughing fits, Perdita places her hand over Viola's mouth and begins to press down, suffocating her. Sick of Viola's physical and verbal abuse, the thought of killing Viola has been on Perdita's mind for quite some time. At first, Perdita thought to herself that this might have been a mercy for her beloved sister. But in the end, she knew it was for herself. She's had enough of waiting around for Viola to die, and she was now ready to take her rightful place as Lady of Bly Manor. Viola Lloyd is finally dead at age 35, but this is not the end of her story. With Viola dead, Arthur is left a widower. Arthur, now Lord of Bly Manor, is expected to choose a new wife. While many desirable young women present themselves to him, Arthur chooses to ignore them. He misses his late wife, and he finds that when he's around Perdita, he's reminded of Viola. So he decides to marry her, which she happily agrees. The two marry in Bly Chapel, but this time the ceremony is held almost in secret, with only the couple and the vicar present. Perdita becomes Lady of Bly Manor and commissions another large painting of herself, placing it next to Viola's at the top of the grand staircase. But Perdita still feels her sister's large shadow looming over her newfound title, and she finds that her ladyship is not all she expected it to be. Isabel had inherited her mother's defiance and stubbornness, refusing to acknowledge Perdita as her own mother. The family's fortune has only diminished with time, meaning that Perdita will never be a great lady as her sister had been. She will never be able to experience the lavish lifestyle that Viola had afforded herself. The family's finances would become so dire that most of the staff at Bly would be let go. Perdita would struggle to maintain the manor, and this would foster resentment towards her husband, Viola, and Isabel. With little else to do and no financial prospects, Perdita's attention turns to the giant locked trunk of treasures left to Isabel in the attic. She pleads with Arthur for the key so that they would be able to sell off Isabel's inheritance to get by, but Arthur refuses her outright. Arthur chooses to uphold his promise to his late wife, much to Perdita's displeasure. Perdita cannot accept her husband's decision, and behind his back, in the cover of night, retrieves the keys to the chest. She goes to the attic where the chest is kept and unlocks the treasure chest. Viola's inheritance to her daughter lay under the cover of sheer silk and rose petals, seemingly ready for Perdita's taking. Perdita admires her forbidden treasure, and she holds up a beautiful dress, basking in its beauty. But as she's admiring the dress, two arms suddenly shoot out from the sleeves and proceeds to choke her to death. In the morning, Arthur goes to find Perdita, only to discover her cold, lifeless corpse in front of the open chest. Her eyes have glazed over, and the look of horror on her face will forever haunt Arthur for the rest of his days. The story cuts back to Viola, to the night of her death. As Perdita smothers her, Viola wakes to find herself in the bedroom, the room in which she was confined to during her quarantine. Her face is shrouded in her sheer silk and rose petals. She is confused and rushes to leave the room, only to find it locked. She goes to explore her windows, only to find that there is nothing but complete darkness. It becomes quite clear that she is trapped in her room, surrounded by an unnatural darkness. When she goes to open her wardrobe, she is greeted once again with the same sheer silk and rose petals, but she also finds her old dresses that she had packed away for her daughter Isabel. When she goes to the vanity, to her delight, she finds her reflection showing her face, beautiful and unmarred by the sickness that she had fought for so long. She also finds her beautiful jewels and rare gems. With nowhere to go, Viola returns to the bed to sleep, where she would then wake, only to find herself still trapped in the mysterious cycle. She would wake She would walk, and she would sleep. As time goes by, Viola finds that her once beautiful reflection has now turned into a horrifying, decomposing face. In fright, she would drape one of the dresses over the mirror to hide from her reflection. More and more time goes by, and her repetitive routine of waking, walking, and sleeping continues. Viola comes to understand that she is trapped in her dream of her own making, a purgatory of her own design. She uncovers the mirror and stares at her decomposed face, but she no longer recoils in fear. She seems to accept the truth that she is dead and that she is trapped in the treasure chest. The only thing that she can look forward to is that one day her daughter would grow old enough to come and claim her inheritance, and Viola would be able to see her again. So she would continue to wait. Years go by, and she suddenly hears a sound coming from outside the door. Finally, Isabel has come to claim her inheritance. Viola waits with great joy and anticipation, only to find that instead of Isabel, her sister and murderer, Perdita, comes to claim her daughter's inheritance. Astonishment and surprise quickly turns to rage, and Viola grasps Perdita's neck through the dress, choking her traitorous sister to death. She rises from the chest, now garbed in her beautiful clothes, and looks upon Perdita's dead corpse. As she lingers in the attic, she sees her husband, Arthur, who discovers Perdita's body. The sadness on his face stuns Viola, and she retreats back into her sleeping death. She returns to the chest to wait for her daughter. She knows she will never be reunited with her family again, but she is content to be near them. But as time goes by, all the family fortunes are gone. Arthur, now a widower for a second time, and little to no prospects, decide to leave Bly Manor for good. He sells the manor and decides to live a quieter and more humble life with his daughter. Viola is now just content to be near her husband and daughter, and remains quietly in the trunk. She no longer cares about Bly, or the treasures, or power. Her only wish is to be close to her beloved family. As Arthur packs what remains of their belongings, he and Isabel drag the chest outside. Viola is excited to be taken with the family, but her excitement will soon turn to more heartbreak. Over the years, Arthur had grown into a superstitious man. After living with Viola's seemingly unending living death, and then Perdita's horrific supernatural death, Arthur is convinced that the trunk is cursed. He's too scared to open it, and he will not have it near his daughter. So with Isabel's help, he abandons the trunk and throws it in the lake. Viola, still in the trunk, sinks to the bottom of the lake, completely abandoned. She is devastated. The pull to the other realm beyond had once affected her, but over the years she had resisted it. Now, completely abandoned, she outright rejected it. She willed herself, her own gravity, into existence, a gravity that will change Bly forever, and will be the catalyst for the misery and horror for many of the characters on the show. Viola refuses to leave Bly, and would once again fall into her routine of sleeping, waking, and walking. No longer bound to the chest, Viola would wake at the bottom of the lake and walk the grounds of Bly, as if waking from a nightmare. She would go to the bedroom she once shared with her husband and daughter, hoping to find her family there waiting for her, only to find the bed empty, and her memories would return to her, and pain would compel her back to her sleep, and the cycle continues. More years roll by. Viola's memory begins to fade. Soon her very identity begins to slip away, and as her memories and sense of self fades, so too does her features. Her once striking, beautiful face fades to a blank, doll-like visage. Only her continued routine of waking, walking, and sleeping remains. Driven by a forgotten need to see her daughter, Viola is now truly the Lady of the Lake. She continues to wander through Bly, taking the same path over and over and over again. She leaves her muddy footprints behind as evidence of her nocturnal walks, but she will soon start to leave other things behind. Something far more sinister than muddy footprints. Viola's sheer will and refusal to leave essentially curses Bly and all those who enter its grounds. This manifestation of her own will creates a powerful gravity that traps any unfortunate person to die on the grounds of Bly. Instead of the pull of the great beyond, they are pulled by Viola's overpowering force. These souls are forced to suffer the same fate as the Lady in the Lake. They erode over time, forgetting pieces of themselves, turning into faceless wandering spirits. Many who are trapped are direct victims who are murdered by Viola. Perdita is the first victim, followed by so many others who happen to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. Anyone who happens upon Viola during her nightly walks is usually killed. A plague doctor is her second victim. He happens upon her as he is attending to patients during a viral outbreak. Viola grabs him by the throat and asks him where her daughter is. He is unable to answer her, and she proceeds to break his neck. The next unfortunate soul is a vicar that was sent to exorcise Viola from Bly. She barely even noticed him when she killed him, walking away with his body in her firm grip, seemingly in a daze. Her youngest victim is a little unnamed boy who happened to be sleeping in the master bedroom. Viola, seeking a child, takes the boy with her, even though she could not even remember which child she was actually looking for anymore. Viola's faintest lingering drive to find her daughter compels her to take the boy with her, and she unknowingly drowns him when she returns to her sleep under the lake. The next victim is Peter Quint, who had just finished stealing Charlotte Wingrave's necklace from the master bedroom. He just so happened to be in Viola's path, and she throttles him to death as she continues on her routine. Peter Quint's death will then lead to Rebecca Jessel and Hannah Gross's death, who will also become trapped at Bly. All these poor souls are doomed to suffer along Viola, seemingly till the end of time. This seemed to be the same fate for the American au pair, Dani Clayton, but Dani managed to do something miraculous. When Flora is taken by the Lady in the Lake to be drowned, as she returns to her slumber, Dani Clayton catches up to her. In a panic to save Flora, Dani recites the same words Viola told her baby so many centuries ago. It's you, it's me, it's us. These words are a significant plot point in many of the major show's story arcs. It acts as an incantation that invites the soul of a deceased person to share a body of a living one. It is not made clear why these words make this happen, or even how Dani knows to speak them, but my theory is that it expresses Viola's desire to be with her daughter, a desire that was never diminished even after everything else about Viola had eroded over time. Viola no longer remembers her own name, or even her daughter, but her burning desire to be reunited has turned into a primal need that triggers her never-ending search for reunification with somebody else. Dani witnessed Peter using this incantation to possess Miles' body, So perhaps she recognizes that this is what Viola might be looking for and uses it to stop her from drowning Flora. But the narrator seems to suggest that the words came to Dani from a primal or instinctual feeling, something from within her very bones. Bones and ancient knowledge has been talked about many times in my Bly Manor videos, so please go check out Jamie's video for more information on this topic. Whatever the case may be, Dani invites Viola into herself as a passenger. This seemingly breaks Viola's hold over Bly, and her gravity vanishes. The trapped souls are freed and move on into the unknown. Dani's eye changes color to visually represent Viola's presence within her, still lingering and waiting within her. While all seems well, Dani knows that this is not the end of their story. She feels Viola's restlessness, and the prowling continues within her. Dani compares Viola to a beast in the jungle, waiting to consume her. The two coexist with Dani in control for years, but Viola's will, once again, would not diminish, and she continues to haunt Dani, slowly gaining more and more ground and more control over Dani's body and thoughts. Viola's desires start to invade Dani's mind, and Dani begins to see her own reflection as the Lady in the Lake more and more. After one night, when Dani has a dream of drowning Jamie in the lake, she wakes and finds her hand hovering over Jamie's throat. Dani knows the time has come to let Viola return to the lake. She travels back to Bly, leaving Jamie behind. At Bly, Viola takes over Dani's body and reverts back into her old routines, where she returns to the lake, killing Dani in the process. Now, the narrator believes this essentially means that Viola and Dani become a new type of Lady in the Lake, a hybrid of the two women, the Lady in the Lake who still haunts Bly, but will no longer harm others. Viola's will of waking, walking, and sleeping has now turned into a benign spirit due to Dani's good and kind nature. The narrator believes that this Dani-Viola hybrid will continue to haunt Bly as Viola once did, and soon parts of Dani too will be forgotten, eroded to time, doomed to be bound to Viola forever. But as I discussed in my Dani Clayton and Jamie video, I do not believe this to be so. The narrator, who is revealed to be Jamie, is seen in the last shot of the show, sleeping in a chair with what is clearly Dani's hand resting on her shoulder. This to me suggests that Dani is not bound to Bly or Viola. She's bound to Jamie and chooses to wait for Jamie quietly. Revealing herself to Jamie would disrupt Jamie's life, as seen when Peter reveals himself to Rebecca. Jamie would never be able to live a normal life. If she knew Dani was waiting for her, she would be tempted to be reunited with her. So Dani patiently waits for her love in secret. This is something that Viola would never do, suggesting that the apparition seen at the end of the show is not a Viola-Dani hybrid. This means that Viola has either returned to the lake once more, or has finally moved on into the unknown. I am more inclined to believe that she has been finally forced into the unknown by Dani's death. While I mentioned earlier that Dani breaks the curse over Bly when she invites Viola into herself, I think in many ways Dani vanquishes and truly ends Viola's curse over her when she surrenders to Viola's will and allows Viola to drown her. Viola has always been willful, and her defiance is something that triggers this whole curse. Viola and Dani are thematically opposites. Viola's love has always been conditional and selfish. She loves those that are subservients or extensions of her own self. Her once beloved sister, Perdita, used to be her most cherished person, a meek younger sister she could control and bind to her will. But once Viola became ill and Perdita could no longer be controlled or subjugated, Viola grew resentful of her and started to physically and verbally abuse her. Same with her husband Arthur. He was chosen because he was less notable and was just a distant relative that Viola could control. She grew to love him over time, but again, it was on her terms, and he was never equal in her eyes. Her daughter Isabel, who she loved above all else, was also an extension of herself. She wanted Isabel to have her old treasures and to have control over Bly. Even as an infant, Isabel was being prepped to become the Lady of Bly Manor one day. When she became sick, she still insisted on being with her daughter, even though this might expose Isabel to her disease. While this is understandable for a mother to want to be with her child, Viola seems to care little for her daughter's health. If Arthur and Perdita were not around to refuse, I think Viola would have just had Isabel by her side, sickness and all. Viola generally seems to disregard other people's desire and needs, and seems to always prioritize herself, and this becomes her downfall. After her murder, she becomes a malevolent spirit that causes unending misery to herself and other unfortunate people she trapped with her gravity. Dani Clayton is the opposite. She's a caretaker who prioritizes others. She puts herself in harm's way multiple times throughout the show, and ultimately sacrifices herself to save Flora and Jamie. The two opposing forces are equally powerful, and seems to negate each other upon Dani's death. If Dani is not the Lady in the Lake, or bound to Viola, as evidenced by her appearance besides Jamie at the end of the show, then I would argue that Viola has been forced to move on, or exists as a benign spirit, for as stated by the narrator, no one ever was taken or hurt by the Lady in the Lake ever again. One of the show's main parables is that love and possession are not the same thing. Viola may love her family, but she desires to possess them. As mentioned before, she has little regard for others, and is most evident with those closest to her. Once her circumstances of power are taken away by her illness, her relationship with her sister turns sour, with Viola's non-stop verbal and physical abuse. She continues to prioritize her needs above her family's, and even after death, continues to cause misery and pain. When she's completely abandoned by her family, she lashes out at others and continues to haunt Bly, refusing to leave or let others leave. Bly was something she coveted in life, doing everything humanly possible to retain her power over the property. In death, she has complete dominion and power over the land, cursing all those who die there, to suffer the same fate of never-ending suffering. She causes so much death, pain, and grief, but is completely unfazed and even oblivious to it. Her death only made her worst traits amplified and more insidious. When Viola turns into the faceless Lady of the Lake, she no longer even remembers details of her life, but she continues to haunt, acting on primitive desires and needs. It is only with Dani Clayton's strong will and her love for others that Viola is finally stopped. Viola's ultimate fate is unknown, but she leaves a legacy of misery, truly a monster that haunted the living and the dead.
Thank you for watching the video. If you liked it, please click the like button and subscribe, and leave a comment. Thanks again.